A $1.11 miracle. True story. Tess was a precocious 8-year-old when she heard her mom and dad talking about her little brother, Andrew. All she knew was that he was very sick, and they were completely out of money. They were moving to a rental apartment complex next month because Daddy didn't have the money for the doctor bills and their house. Only a very costly surgery could save him now, and it was looking like there was no one to loan them the money. She heard Daddy say to her tearful mother with whispered desperation, "Only a miracle can save him now." Tess went to her bedroom and pulled a glass jelly jar from its hiding place in the closet. She poured all the change out on the floor and counted it carefully, 3 times even. The total had to be exactly perfect. No chance here for mistakes. Carefully placing the coins back in the jar and twisting on the cap, she slipped out the back door and made her way 6 blocks to Rexall's drugstore with the big red Indian chief sign above the door. She waited patiently for the pharmacist to give her some attention, but he was too busy at this moment. Tess twisted her feet to make a scuffing noise. Nothing. She cleared her throat with the most disgusting sound she could muster. No good. Finally, she took a quarter from her jar and banged it on the glass counter. That did it. "And what do you want?" the pharmacist asked in an annoyed tone of voice. "I'm talking to my brother from Chicago whom I haven't seen in ages," he said without waiting for a reply to his question. "Well, I wanted to talk to you about my brother," Tess answered back in the same annoyed tone. "He's really, really sick, and I want to buy a miracle." "I beg your pardon?" said the pharmacist. "His name is Andrew, and he has something bad growing inside his head, and my daddy says only a miracle can save him now. How much does a miracle cost?" "We don't sell miracles here, little girl. I'm sorry, but I can't help you," said the pharmacist, softening a little. "Listen, I have the money to pay for it. If it isn't enough, I will get the rest. Just tell me how much it costs." The pharmacist's brother was a well-dressed man. He stooped down and asked the little girl, "What kind of miracle does your brother need?" "I don't know," Tess replied with her eyes welling up. "I just know he's really sick, and Mommy says he needs an operation. But Daddy can't pay for it, so I want to use my money." "How much do you have?" asked the man from Chicago. $1.11, Tess answered, barely audibly. "And that's all the money I have, but I can get some more if I need to." "Well, what a coincidence," smiled the man. $1.11. The exact price of a miracle for little brothers. He took her money in one hand, and with the other hand he grasped her mitten and said, "Take me to where you live. I want to see your brother and meet your parents. Let's see if I have the kind of miracle you need." That well-dressed man was Dr. Carlton Armstrong, a surgeon specializing in neurosurgery. The operation was completed without charge, and it wasn't long until Andrew was home again and doing well. Mom and Dad were happily talking about the chain of events that led them to this place. "That surgery," her mom whispered, "was a real miracle. I wonder how much it could have cost." Tess smiled. She knew exactly how much a miracle cost. $1.11, plus the faith of a little child. A glass of milk. A young poor boy who was begging from door to door to feed his hungry stomach decided he would ask for a meal at the next house. However, he lost his nerve when a lovely young woman opened the door. Instead of a meal, he just asked for a glass of water. The woman thought he looked hungry, so she brought him a large glass of milk. He drank it slowly and then asked, "How much do I owe you?" "You don't owe me anything," she replied. "Mother has taught us never to accept pay for kindness." He said, "Then I thank you from my heart." Years later, that young woman became critically ill. The local doctors were battling because they couldn't cure her. They finally sent her to the big city where they called specialists to study her rare illness. Dr. Howard Kelly was called in for the consultation. When he heard the name of the town where she came from, a strange light filled his eyes. Immediately, he rose and went down the hall of the hospital to her room. He recognized her at once. He went back to the consultation room determined to do his best to save her life. From that day, he gave special attention to that case. After a long struggle, the battle was won. Dr. Kelly requested the business office to pass the final bill to him for approval. He looked at it, then wrote something on the bill. It was sent to her room. The woman feared opening it, for she was sure it might take the rest of her life to pay for it all. Finally she looked, and noticed something was written at the end of the note. Paid in full with a glass of milk. Tears filled her eyes as she immediately remembered. Every form of kindness you show doesn't bounce. It reproduces itself. Not necessarily before your eyes, but it always does. It is good to be good. Always be nice, for it always comes back to you. A gift of love. "Can I see my baby?" the happy new mother asked. When the bundle was nestled in her arms, and she moved the fold of cloth to look upon his tiny face, she gasped. The doctor turned quickly and looked at the tall hospital window. The baby had been born without ears. Time proved that the baby's hearing was perfect. It was only his appearance that was marred. When he rushed home from school one day and flung himself into his mother's arms, she sighed, knowing that his life was going to be a succession of heartbreaks. He blurted out the tragedy. "A boy, a big boy, called me a freak." He grew up, handsome for his misfortune. A favorite with his fellow students, he might have been class president, but for that. He developed a gift, a talent for literature and music. "But you might mingle with other young people," his mother reproved him, but felt a kindness in her heart. The boy's father had a session with the family physician. Could nothing be done? "I believe I could graft on a pair of outer ears, if they could be procured," the doctor decided. Whereupon the search began for a person who would make such a sacrifice for a young man. 2 years went by. Then, "You are going to the hospital, son. Mother and I have someone who will donate the ears you need. But it's a secret," said the father. The operation was a brilliant success, and a new person emerged. His talents blossomed into genius, and school and college became a series of triumphs. Later, he married and entered the diplomatic service. "But I must know," he urged his father. "Who gave so much for me? I could never do enough for him." "I do not believe you could," said the father. "But the agreement was that you were not to know. Not yet." The years kept their profound secret, but the day did come, one of the darkest days that a son must endure. He stood with his father over his mother's casket. Slowly, tenderly, the father stretched forth a hand and raised the thick, reddish-brown hair to reveal that the mother had no outer ears. "Mother said she was glad she never let her hair be cut," he whispered gently. "And nobody ever thought Mother less beautiful, did they?" Real beauty lies not in the physical appearance, but in the heart. Real treasure lies not in what can be seen, but what cannot be seen. Real love lies not in what is done and known, but in what is done but not known. A Tale of Tradition. A hard-working Chinese rice farmer was supporting his children, wife, and his aging father. He worked long and hard each day, and still he was barely making enough to feed his children and wife. One day, he stopped working for the entire day. Instead, he built a small cart out of wood he had. The next day, he went to his aging father and insisted that the old man was no longer able to help the family. He was only eating and taking up precious resources. So he loaded him into the newly built cart and headed up a nearby mountain. When he got to the top, he stopped and aimed the cart facing down the mountain. But before he could roll the cart, his father stopped him, saying, "Wait, son, I can understand what you are doing and even why you are doing it, but please save the cart. Your son will need it." Hospital windows. Two men, both seriously ill, occupied the same hospital room. One man was allowed to sit up in his bed for an hour each morning to help drain the fluid from his lungs. His bed was next to the room's only window. The other man had to spend all his time flat on his back. The men talked for hours on end. They spoke of their wives and families, their homes, their jobs, their involvement in the military service, where they had been on vacation. Every afternoon, when the man in the bed by the window could sit up, he would pass the time by describing to his roommate all the things he could see outside the window. The man in the other bed began to live for those 1-hour periods where his world would be broadened and enlivened by all the activity and color of the outside world. The window overlooked a park with a lovely lake. Ducks and swans played on the water, while children sailed their model boats. Young lovers walked arm in arm amidst flowers of every color, and a fine view of the city skyline could be seen in the distance. As the man by the window described all this in exquisite detail, the man on the other side of the room would close his eyes and imagine the picturesque scene. One warm afternoon, the man by the window described a parade passing by. Although the other man couldn't hear the band, he could see it in his mind's eye as the gentleman by the window portrayed it with descriptive words. Days and weeks passed. One morning, the day nurse arrived to bring water for their baths, only to find the lifeless body of the man by the window, who had died peacefully in his sleep. She was saddened and called the hospital attendants to take the body away. As soon as seemed appropriate, the other man asked if he could be moved to the next window. The nurse was happy to make the switch, and after making sure he was comfortable, she left him alone. Slowly, painfully, he propped himself up on one elbow to take his first look at the real world outside. He strained to slowly turn and looked out the window, only to find a blank wall. A true love story. One day, a young guy and a young girl fell in love. But the guy came from a poor family. The girl's parents weren't too happy. So the young man decided not only to court the girl, but to court her parents as well. In time, the parents saw that he was a good man and was worthy of their daughter's hand. But there was another problem. The man was a soldier. Soon war broke out and he was being sent overseas for a year. The week before he left, the man knelt on his knee and asked his lady love, "Will you marry me?" She wiped a tear, said yes, and they were engaged. They agreed that when he got back in 1 year, they would get married. But tragedy struck. A few days after he left, the girl had a major vehicular accident. It was a head-on collision. When she woke up in the hospital, she saw her father and mother crying. Immediately she knew there was something wrong. She later found out that she had suffered a brain injury. The part of her brain that controlled her face muscles was damaged. Her once lovely face was now disfigured. She cried as she saw herself in the mirror. "Yesterday I was beautiful. Today I'm a monster." Her body was also covered with so many ugly wounds. Right there and then, she decided to release her fiancé from their promise. She knew he wouldn't want her anymore. She would forget about him and never see him again. For 1 year, the soldier wrote many letters, but she wouldn't answer. He phoned her many times, but she wouldn't return his calls. But after 1 year, the mother walked into her room and announced, "He's back from the war." The girl shouted, "No, please don't tell him about me. Don't tell him I'm here." The mother said, "He's getting married," and handed her a wedding invitation. The girl's heart sank. She knew she still loved him, but she had to forget him now. With great sadness, she opened the wedding invitation. And then she saw her name on it. Confused, she asked, "What is this?" That was when the young man entered her room with a bouquet of flowers. He knelt beside her and asked, "Will you marry me?" The girl covered her face with her hands and said, "I'm ugly." The man said, "Without your permission, your mother sent me your photos. When I saw your photos, I realized that nothing has changed. You're still the person I fell in love with. You're still as beautiful as ever, because I love you." A tribute to Mother. He was a young boy who lived with his elderly mother. His mother wanted him to learn how to play the piano because she longed to hear her son play for her. She sent her son to a piano teacher who took Robbie in under her guidance. However, there was one small problem because Robbie was not musically inclined and therefore was very slow in learning. The teacher did not have much faith in the boy because of his weakness. However, the mother was very enthusiastic, and every week she would send Robbie to the teacher. One day, Robbie stopped attending the piano lessons. The teacher thought that he had given up, and in fact, she was quite pleased since she did not give much hope to Robbie. Not long after, the piano teacher was given the task to organize a piano concert in town. She sent out circulars to invite the students and public to attend the event. Suddenly, she received a call from Robbie who offered to take part in the concert. The teacher told Robbie that he was not good enough and that he was no longer a student since he had stopped coming for lessons. Robbie begged her to give him a chance and promised that he would not let her down. Finally, she gave in but scheduled him to play last, hoping that he would change his mind at the last minute. When the big day came, the hall was packed and the children gave their best performance. Finally, and as his name was announced, he walked in. He was not in proper attire and his hair was not properly groomed. The teacher was really nervous since Robbie's performance could spoil the whole evening's brilliant performance. As Robbie started playing, the crowd became silent and was amazed at the skill of this little boy. In fact, he gave the best performance of the evening. At the end of his presentation, the crowd and the piano teacher gave him a standing ovation. The crowd asked Robbie how he managed to play so brilliantly. With a microphone in front of him, he said, "I was not able to attend the weekly piano lessons as there was no one to send me because my mother was sick with cancer. She just passed away and I wanted her to hear me play. You see, this is the first time she is able to hear me play because when she was alive, she was deaf, and now I know she is listening to me. I have to play my best for her." When you have a passion and a reason to do something, you will surely excel. You may not be talented or gifted, but if you have a strong enough reason to do something, you will be able to tap into your inner given potential. When there is a will, there is a way. Childish Behaviour. A 24-year-old boy looking out from the train's window shouted, "Dad, look, the trees are going behind." Dad smiled, and a young couple sitting nearby looked at the 24-year-old's childish behavior with pity. Suddenly, he again exclaimed, "Dad, look, the clouds are running with us." The couple couldn't resist, and said to the old man, "Why don't you take your son to a good doctor?" The old man smiled and said, "I did, and we are just coming from the hospital. My son was blind from birth. He just got his eyes today." Every single person on the planet has a story. Don't judge people before you truly know them. The truth might surprise you. Seeking happiness. This story is about a beautiful, expensively dressed lady who complained to her psychiatrist that she felt her whole life was empty. It had no meaning. So, the lady went to visit a counselor to seek out happiness. The counselor called over the old lady who cleaned the office floors and then said to the rich lady, I am going to ask Mary here to tell you how she found happiness. All I want you to do is listen to her." So the old lady put down her broom, sat on a chair, and told her story. "Well, my husband died of malaria, and 3 months later my only son was killed by a car. I had nobody. I had nothing left. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I never smiled at anyone. I even thought of taking my own life. Then one evening, a little kitten followed me home from work. Somehow I felt sorry for the kitten. It was cold outside, so I decided to let the kitten in. I got some milk, and the kitten licked the plate clean. Then it purred and rubbed against my leg, and for the first time in months I smiled. Then I stopped to think, if helping a little kitten could make me smile, maybe doing something for people could make me happy. So the next day I baked some biscuits and took them to a neighbor who was sick in bed. Every day I tried to do something nice for someone. It made me so happy to see them happy. Today, I don't know of anybody who sleeps and eats better than I do. I've found happiness by giving it to others." When she heard that, the rich lady cried. She had everything that money could buy, but she had lost the things which money cannot buy. The beauty of life does not depend on how happy you are, but on how happy others can be because of you. Happiness is not a destination, it's a journey. Happiness is not tomorrow, it is now. Happiness is not dependency, it is a decision. Happiness is what you are, not what you have. The House with the Golden Windows. The little girl lived in a small, very simple, poor house on a hill, and she would play in the small garden. As she grew up, she was able to see over the garden fence and across the valley to a wonderful house high on the hill. And this house had golden windows, so golden and shining that the little girl would dream of how magic it would be to grow up and live in a house with golden windows instead of an ordinary house like hers. And although she loved her parents and her family, she yearned to live in such a golden house and dreamed all day about how wonderful and exciting it must feel to live there. When she got to an age where she gained enough skill and responsibility to go outside her garden fence, she asked her mother if she could go for a bike ride outside the gate and down the lane. After pleading, her mother finally allowed her to go, insisting that she kept close to the house and didn't wander too far. The day was beautiful, and the little girl knew exactly where she was heading. Down the lane across the valley, she rode her bike until she got to the gate of the golden house across the other hill. As she parked her bike and leaned it against the gate, she focused her eyes on the path that led to the house and then on the house itself, and was so disappointed as she realized that all the windows were plain and rather dirty, reflecting nothing other than the sad neglect of the house that stood derelict. She was so sad that she didn't go any further and turned, heartbroken. As she remounted her bike and glanced up, she saw a sight that amazed her. There, across the way on her side of the valley, was a little house, and its windows sparkled golden, as the sun shone on her little home. She then realized that she had been living in her golden house, and all the love and care she found there was what made her home the golden house. Everything she dreamed of was right there in front of her nose.
Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please like and share.